All right, what's up, guys? Here again, Christopher Sweat, GrayStak Media. I'm sitting down with Richard Berg.
All right.
And we have like a lot of cool stuff to talk about. We're actually sitting here in Streeterville.
Beautiful.
So thanks, Richard, for coming to my neighborhood.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So we have a lot of things to talk about, but for like people that haven't met you before, or maybe have heard about you but don't know the details, maybe you could give a quick introduction.
Okay, sure. So I'm Richard Berg. I'm the host of FightBack Radio podcast. Spent most of my life in the labor movement. I was a member of the Teamsters, Local 743, for just under 20 years, and part of a dissident movement within the Teamsters, Teamsters for Democratic Union. And eventually we took over the local. I became the president. So it was a large union, 14,000 members, 140 bargaining units. And but then, whatever, long story, but I had difficulties with the international president, Jimmy Hoffa, and yes. So I
Literally.
What's that?
Literally Jimmy Hoffa.
Yes.
Okay.
Not the father who was killed, the son who's still alive.
Okay.
But so anyways, I was removed, and so then I went to work for.
We're glad you're still here, by the way.
Glad I'm still here too. I worked for AFSCME for 5 years after that, negotiating contracts and which is government workers union, and then after that, the Chicago Teachers Union. I was the coordinator of the charter school division.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
And just to kind of break this down, because we like to get into some of the details, I think some people think they understand labor unions, organizing, politics. Could you give just like the basic idea of like what is the function of labor unions?
Sure. So I think unions are the economic organizations of workers, and in the public sector they do political things, even in the private sector, but workers expect their unions to look out for them around issues of wages and benefits, of course, but also health and safety, distribution of overtime. All the laws allow unions to negotiate over wages, hours, and working conditions. And different sectors are a little different, but that's the basics of it. And but also, I would say they're the leading organizations of the entire working class, in the sense that if like when I was a kid, if whatever the steel workers and the auto workers who were unionized made, the unskilled people, everybody else would make a little less than that. If they went up, everybody went up. If they went down, everybody went down. So the level of exploitation of workers in the United States, whether it's high or low, is led by unions. That's the front end of the struggle.
Okay. And from the historical perspective, because I think this still goes over a lot of people's heads, and maybe you can correct this or add, but the impetus for labor unions in general was that corporate management was abusing labor to the extent to where even at certain points it was illegal to take a day off sick, for example.
Yeah. Oh, yes. It's still in some places. I mean, look at federal workers right now. They're criminalizing some of them that are trying to call in sick. But yes, it was more extreme in the 18th, 19th centuries. It was. But unions, I think, came with capitalism. Before that, during feudalism days, you had peasants in an agrarian society and relationships that were different. But when labor power became a commodity, people started to, they realized they had more power if they would unite together, and they did. And so you start to see unions, very early on, as capitalism becomes the dominant mode of production.
Okay. And then FightBack Radio, some people that are watching this have listened before. Could you tell us just like a little bit more about FightBack Radio and how you got into that? So
FightBack Radio is it's a podcast. It's a production of FightBack News, which is a daily online newspaper type of thing. Obviously, where everything's electronic now. But FightBack News covered a lot of the things I was involved in the labor movement. It would cover different union issues and workers fighting back against their bosses and struggles within unions, and gave voice where other places we really couldn't find it. And after, or even before I retired, actually, but just towards the end of my work life, the editor of FightBack News asked me if I'd be willing to do a podcast, and we talked to a few other folks to help us with the production issues, which is important because I'm not great at that. But so for 3 years now, we've been coming out with every other week. On a Monday, we release an episode of FightBack Radio podcast, and usually it's a one-on-one interview.
Yep.
Hour, maybe a little more, but not a lot more. And that's the way it came about.
Okay. And typically, and I'm a regular listener, but typically...
Thank you, by the way.
Yeah, no, of course. It's awesome. It's a great podcast. But typically, you bring on activists from different sectors or communities?
Yeah, that's right. So, because I've been involved in things a long time, I've gotten to know a lot of people. But yeah, the idea is to lift up the struggles of people, whether it be in unions or in the Black liberation movement, immigrant rights, all international stuff. The current episode right now talks about Venezuela.
Sure.
Where there's there's potential war with Venezuela. Trump saying there's drugs there, but we kind of expose that it's more oil and other things that are going on. And so it's different things, but it's leaders of the struggles that are putting forward a people's perspective on whether it be Venezuela or the Teamsters or whatever the issue is.
Okay, that's awesome. And then we met kind of inadvertently through a lot of the protest coverage that we do at GrayStak.
And yes, and you've done a great job on that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes, you've done a great job.
Thank you. And so that's kind of cool because I was going out and kind of learning more about what is actually happening on the ground, because I feel like if you watch the news, you literally can't see what is the ground reality, what are people dealing with. Obviously, Chicago's in the news a lot. We have a lot of ICE activity on the ground. We have different kinds of clashes that pop up through the week. There's a lot of federal cases and so forth. Kind of given what you're doing with the radio and your how you're kind of active on the ground, what are you seeing or what are you prioritizing at the moment?
Yeah, I'm still involved with the labor movement in a big way, and so I've been involved in trying to do some strike support work here in Chicago. There's Teamsters at a company called Mauser that is out on strike. A lot of their workers are immigrants, and I'm not sure if they're documented or not, but we've been working to try to support them. I'm a delegate still to the Chicago Federation of Labor, so personally I'm involved a lot in the labor movement. But in terms of FightBack Radio, we've been reaching out to people that have been involved, here in Chicago in fighting, the rapid response, fighting the ICE raids through rapid response and through other things. We had Omar Flores on FightBack Radio, and we've also interviewed people who were involved in Washington D.C., where they sent in the National Guard to take over the police and the policing in Washington and the resistance there. And then similarly in Los Angeles, the people from the Centro CSO and Legalization for All Network, we've had on to FightBack Radio as well to talk to them. So those three cities, and I know Portland and others, maybe that's coming. We'll have to see. But
Sure.
But as Trump continues this just massive repression and violations of people's civil rights, we're bringing in leaders of the resistance to talk about it.
Okay. And I think generally labor, the public tends to try to bring labor into or want to bring labor into domestic politics or even foreign policy. Could you draw a distinct kind of separation and talk about when does it even make sense for labor to be thinking about domestic politics or foreign policy, if at all?
Yeah. So there's many things that pull on different sections of labor, from the average guy or woman or who's working, whatever their day-to-day job, to the union leaders. The most basic things, like I said, are usually the wages, hours, working conditions. So, for example, you'll see the auto workers right now are paying a lot of attention to tariffs.
Yep.
And because it affects, their ability to have jobs in the United States. So for most union leaders, jobs is a critically important thing. For the building
Sure.
trades, for example, that's clearly the main issue. Whether, carpenters, operating
HVAC.
engineers, yeah, right,
Okay.
all those guys, and so they're looking at trying to get union jobs that pay well, and so they're involved in politics to make sure zoning and things are built union and safe and like that, and so. So you'll see union people getting involved in local politics to make sure buildings are done union, whatever.
Oh, sure.
But also and maybe the public sector is more involved the more local it is. But things like like my old union, the Chicago Teachers Union, it was very important that money, because most of the funding comes from the state, so that it's important that you explain to parents that we need state representatives to adequately fund our schools.
Sure.
And similarly with AFSCME, you want clean water. The federal government right now, right now with the federal government shutdown, you're seeing all kinds of problems. I just, today they're talking about cutting back airplane flights, and and so there's all these things. These are mostly domestic things, but tariffs, for example, fit international policies. And I think
this is a great answer, by the way. You're breaking this down. No, truly. I'll come in when you're done. Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks.
This is great.
But also, I think it's important for trade unionists to have international trade union solidarity, so that they don't pit workers here against workers there. We don't. It's if people will remember that old people, anyways, like me, that we fought when they got rid of all the tariffs in the North American Free Trade Agreement.
Oh yeah, NATO not NATO, World Trade Organization.
World Trade Organization.
Battle of Seattle. Yeah,
Yes.
Late 90s.
Yes, exactly right. So there was like the steel workers, and in the slogan then was Teamsters and Turtles, because there was environmentalists there that they called turtles, I guess, but unite. And it was important that we were trying to say, well, we need a voice at the table as organized labor, but also I think as progressives and leftists in labor, we're trying to say we need to unite people across the board and not just let the rich people play us all off against each other.
Sure.
And that's true internationally. It's true even within a workplace. They'll play people off by race, by what shift they're on, by gender, by whatever. It's important that workers unite and make demands for a better life for them and their families.
Sure.
And the way to do that is to respect other workers as well and realize that we're all in it together.
That's awesome. And the idea of free trade is actually rooted in a radical idea from the late 1700s. Mm-hmm. And I think people mistakenly think free trade is a libertarian concept. But we can't give the libertarians too much credit, okay?
Well, go ahead.
Okay, but my point is that sometimes people don't understand that the idea of free trade can have negative impacts on domestic jobs or just domestic industry. And so you have some industries that are more protectionist, where they want to prevent foreign companies from operating, say, in the United States. And then there are some industries like chips, where they need global consumers, and they would die if the only consumers were in the United States. For example, you have Jensen Huang, who is the CEO of NVIDIA, and he is pleading to be able to sell chips or more chips in China because he won't be able to keep growing his business. Whereas this is a random one, but like naval manufacturing, a lot of it's concentrated in the South. There's like an operator in Alabama, but for some reason, they can't figure out how to build those ships, more of them, in the south part of the United States. So they have added the Philippines and India to the supply chain. And so when I talk to folks in the Philippines, they're pretty happy because it's a pretty good job and pretty good facility, or another thing that people may not think about is contact centers. You might have an American company, but it outsources the contact center to the Philippines. And there's a lot of high skilled labor there, and they're very complementary to each other. Now, when you talk about solidarity as like a broader concept, that's kind of like the idea of like a unification or like a united bloc, or
Well, I mean, the capital goes to enormous efforts to make it illegal for us to work with each
Sure.
other. So it's like capital can leave the United States and go to any country in the world, but you can't. The American labor unions can't open up a shop there and say, okay, we're going to organize people into the Chicago Teachers Union
Yep.
or whatever. And so labor it has many more obstacles in their way, and the reason is because capital controls the governments of every country, and this country, the United States, is the strongest. It will bully even other countries, and so that all makes it difficult. And so, but there's efforts. There's international trade union organizations. I've went to Greece to talk to people from the World Federation of Trade Unions, and they had a general strike there, and I talked
Yeah.
to some people they elected to the Greek Congress, and it was interesting to, this was at a time when they were being attacked by the European Union and the Germans, especially the central bank, but it's important that we try to support each other in demands. Like in the Philippines, you mentioned, there's we've had on FightBack Radio one of the leaders of the Filipino trade union, the KMU, which I'd kill it if I said it in Tagalog, but it's translated. It's May 1st movement, which comes from
Yep.
the May Day, which was came out of an incident here in Chicago for the Haymarket Martyrs on May 1st,
Yep.
1886. Or yes. So, anyways, but it's okay. So when we look at each other internationally, it's mostly supporting each other's demands and realizing that these trade agreements that we've been all locked out of. You mentioned the battle in Seattle in the late 90s, that we've been locked out of all the agreements since then. It's not like you see union leaders going with the U.S. trade delegation to
Right.
talk to people from any other country. When the G7 happens, or
Sure.
when Trump goes, just came back from Asia. Was there any trade union official with him that was
Right.
saying this is what should be done? Is there any trade union official in his cabinet?
Right.
None of that. And so all of this is played to figure out how can you exploit resources and labor is to the highest possible degree to maximize your profits. And so for us, we're trying to unite across lines and not play against each other, so that we can get the highest standard of living for workers and their families.
Okay. And if I'm thinking of this correctly, do you have the management, and then between the kind of management and the labor sits some type of union structure? I'm not describing it perfectly well, but the idea is that the labor union is supposed to kind of buttress against barriers to collective action, so that the collective can make arguments for increased wages or better working conditions. Is that a decent way to
Yeah, so I mean, basically, a union is the workers coming together, and it can be in a workplace or in a broader, whatever.
Sure.
Laws have hemmed it in over time. So if you look at, whatever the 19th century, there was just strikes where everybody would go out. There was, like the longshoremen in the West Coast called for a strike, and it went from San Francisco up to Seattle.
Right, and these strikes is when the labor basically stops working, right?
Yes.
And it creates a supply chain disruption in the short run.
Yes.
And that's potentially the lever for the negotiations to occur.
Yes.
But we saw that in these early labor eras, the military would come, the police would come, and they would act violently towards that labor when they would strike in those days, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely true. And so
Okay.
like the different pretexts were used over time, but it was you're right. The people would go out on strike, and the idea was, if you stop production, it'll cost the capitalists, the people that own the production, it'll cost them money, so you'll get your raise or whatever. It's make it cheaper for them to give you a living wage than not. And
Sure.
so, yeah, so it was those kinds of things. But you're right. I mean, since the richest people control our government, and we see it now more than ever, here in the United States, and how much money is put into government. And it's not to say there aren't good people here or there, or, that we shouldn't be involved in elections. I think all that is true, but it's difficult. It makes it difficult for us. We do whatever we can. Laws have been passed that restrict what we can do. So it's like, before they used to have general strikes. Now it's if a union calls, for federal workers, for example, for them to even call for a strike or to go on strike is against the law.
Sure.
So they can, they can be fired, or they can even be, depending on what they do, they can be arrested for just doing things that most people in the world have a right to, and that's been a shrinking of what people's rights are over time. They passed a law in the 50s that made it illegal to have secondary boycotts. So if your company buys, if I have a company that makes something and your company buys it, if we say boycott your company, then that's a secondary boycott. So that was a violation of law. So they keep, every time the workers come up with something that works,
Sure.
they'll pass a law to make it, to change, say you can't do that anymore.
Okay.
So it's difficult. But
And even some of the labor scholars that I've talked to over the years have pointed out that more often than not, when these matters enter the court system or the legal arena, the court sides with the management, not the labor. Even if the labor has a fair or valid argument, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And it's like, it's rigged against workers. I mean, and so that's why we need to continue to struggle to change all these things. But the whole system, the laws that are passed that you're taken to a judge or you're going into the judicial system with, were written by people that are millionaires. You look at the United States Congress, how many union members are in there? Like virtually, I mean, maybe one or two.
Sure.
But senators, these are all, and how many of them are millionaires? How many of them are billionaires even? Same with the president, and then they appoint a judiciary, which similar backgrounds, and so it's very difficult. So we're arguing to people that have never worked for any substantial time in their life. For like an hourly rate. Maybe they did a little bit in high school or college, but not it's not been their life career.
Right.
And you're asking them to say, to understand what we're going through, and often they don't. And in the case of the Congress and the president, they get. They get, most of their money comes, if you look at who's making the campaign contributions,
Yeah.
and how much, especially since the Citizens United decision, it's even more difficult.
Sure.
So.
Okay, this brings me to the last question, but obviously this is an ongoing discussion that we're having.
Sure, yeah.
At the No Kings rally 2 weeks ago, one of the big takeaways that I think circulated on the ground the most widely, more wide than anything anybody said that day, was Mayor Brandon Johnson in Chicago, for non-Chicago people,
Yeah.
his call for a general strike. Now, a lot of people on the ground are still trying to figure out what a general strike is, so we can tell them now. But could you just give like your kind of basic definition of a general strike, and we can talk about that?
Sure. I mean, and that's what I saw in Greece, actually, when I was there. They had a general strike. And so it's more common in Europe and other places. But it's basically when it's saying everybody, should stop work for today. And it's of a political nature. It's not like we're just going on strike to get an extra $1 an hour or whatever it is, or to get better health insurance. Although it could be that if you're looking at some of the cuts in the Obamacare health insurance now, but it's a political question usually, and the demands are often of the government, but it's just have all the workers across the country, stop working until they fix whatever the problem is, and recognizing that they don't have the power, they don't have a democracy where the majority can actually have a say, so they use their economic power to try to get the ruling class to do what, to treat them better.
Okay. And I am, just so you know, I'm obsessed with theories of collective action, like extremely obsessed. But so the idea.
I am too, I think.
Yeah, exactly. You're a practitioner. I'm a theorist.
Okay.
Okay. You're out there doing it.
Okay.
I'm out here like,
I see
thinking
you out
about
there
it.
too.
Okay, I appreciate that. But so from a theoretical perspective, the idea is to get that broad cross-sector participation in creating this kind of I'm gonna call it a supply chain disruption, because that is what the elites are very responsive to, is the idea of not being able to be in production. Now, the mayor called for this sort of general strike, but as we've been talking about, there are many barriers to coordinating a general strike, right? People have to find that singular interest. And then some sectors cannot participate legally, which means that many types of individuals who could be struggling or could be doing decent, but maybe can't struggle for that long, would have to like incur those costs, which could be legal implications, financial implications. But, you know, from more of like a idealistic perspective, do you think the general strike idea maybe helps people come up with the new ideas or innovations, or even if it is seemingly unrealistic,
Well,
very hard to achieve?
Well, I mean, you start where you're at, and so it
Okay.
can build from there. And so the general strikes that have happened in the United States, or the one I saw in Greece, just didn't happen overnight. You know, so there was people started doing lesser things. You know, had some partial victories or things taken back, and so as the organization grew stronger, they were able to make their demands more, and to leverage it more. But so to say we could have a general strike right now is not practical. But the fact that the mayor of the city of Chicago suggested a general strike is something you would have, you probably wouldn't have heard in the last 100 years.
Okay.
And so that's significant. And so how do we get there? You have to talk to work. You got to go out and talk to workers.
Sure.
And say, okay, what are you willing to strike for? I mean, people will strike when it's against the law. They have historically in this country. The postal workers, for example, have a union right now today because of a strike that took place in 1970.
Okay.
That gave them collective bargaining rights, and they're being threatened right now as well. But it was against the law for them to strike then. It's against the law for them to strike now. If they take away their union, would they strike again? I don't know. That's up to them. Somebody would have to organize and talk to the leaders in each post office, and the same is true if you're going to do a general strike. You need to talk to people in each factory, each hospital, each school, every kind of workplace there is, every warehouse, and say, well, what are the demands? Most workers are very practical, from my experience. If you go to them and say, we're going to do, the problem is A, B, and C. I've heard you say that. We think we can fix it by doing this and this. They'll make an assessment. They'll say, okay, Richard, you got a good point there. I think that could work. I'm with you. Or you're nuts. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to risk, my job and my family because you're nuts. And but by having these discussions, in the lunchroom. And really, going through it with workers, they come together and they do take actions, and it changes the world. So.
Okay, that's awesome. Now, anything else that you want to share? I know we've talked about so much, and we have many more things to talk about. Yeah. But anything else on your mind? Any focus and initiatives? Anything?
Yeah, no. It's well. Thank you for having me.
Definitely.
I really enjoyed being here and talking to you. And thank you for lifting up FightBack Radio. I'd encourage people to check out the podcast. It's on all the platforms.
Yeah, I've been trying to get Richard to do like a commentary that adds on to the weekly talk. But I mean, I had to have him come sit down with me But maybe he'll give us the weekly commentary soon.
Yeah, it may happen.
Wink, wink to the FightBack News people.
Yes, there we go. There we go. Let's see how we can do it. But yeah, I mean, I think people should, the resistance that's been going on across the country against Trump is inspiring. Here in Chicago, the resistance to ICE as it's come in has inspired me. That people, seemingly the most powerless people, had so many allies stand up to them, their coworkers, their neighbors, and things like that. And people across class and race and nationality have come together here to fight against ICE. And we need to keep pushing back against the Trump agenda. And so, wherever you are, whatever neighborhood, whatever city, there's some organizing going on. I'm very confident of that. And so I would encourage people to get involved in that, whether it's in your union or your church or the local coalition, or I would do those things. Also, I would say, just a week and a half from now, this here in Chicago is a conference of the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression.
We're hoping to be there.
Yeah, so I would encourage everybody, you can go to their website, National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, and register. It doesn't cost very much. It's very cheap. I forgot the amount, but it's going to be at my union hall, the Chicago Teachers Union here in Chicago. And so, come to the conference. I'll be there. Hopefully, I'll see you.
Awesome. Okay, and it's been amazing to speak with you.
Yeah, you as well.
And then, guys, you remember Christopher Sweat, GrayStak Media, Richard Berg.
All right. Thank you.